Assassin's Creed is one of the longest running franchises in Ubisoft's history, and it's also one of my personal favorites. Over the years, the series has had its ups and downs, and I know this from experience because I played almost every single entry in the series, from the very first one back in 2007 to Assassin's Creed Odyssey. So if you haven't played any of the games, let me give you a quick rundown. The first game set the foundation. Assassin's Creed 2, or I should say Ezio, helped solidify the game as a franchise. AC3 was great, but it was plagued by a very long tutorial. AC Black Flag let you sail the high seas as a pirate. Unity could have been awesome, but was marred by bugs and glitches. Syndicate had the misfortune of being that game released after Unity. AC Origins rebooted the series by adding RPG elements, and AC Odyssey expanded on that same formula by adding fantasy elements. Then Valhalla came along and people complained that it was too long and bloated. And the general consensus on AC Mirage is that it's good, but it doesn't add anything new to the table. So when they announced the first VR game in the series, Assassin's Creed Nexus last summer, I was pretty stoked and skeptical about it. Technically, it's a spin-off and not a main entry. It's also exclusive to the MetaQuest platform. There's no Steam VR and PSVR 2 port yet, which kind of limits its audience. And it's kind of funny how we come full circle. The main plot device of every Assassin's Creed game is the Animus. That's the virtual reality machine that reads the genetic memories of your ancestors. And here we are, 16 years after the release of the first game. We are literally entering the Animus using a MetaQuest headset. So that means I'm playing a VR game that's about a VR game. I mean, it couldn't be any more meta than that. So I just completed all 16 missions of Assassin's Creed Nexus, and let me tell you this, it just restored my hope in the series. The game isn't perfect, it's got some quirks here and there, but overall, it's a solid step in the right direction. So let me explain why.
Ooh, she'll be watching. Scary.
I thought she'd never leave.
Just like in the previous Assassin's Creed game, there's two parallel storylines going on at the same time. One in the present day and one in the past. So one of the things that bugged me is that ever since the conclusion of Desmond's arc, is that the present day story was never as good. Black Flag was pretty decent. Unity's story was barely there. I thought AC Syndicate's story was too silly and cartoonish. And they started a new arc in AC Origins when they introduced Layla Hassan. However, those present day stories just never seemed to capture the same magic or charm of the original games. Well, I'm happy to say that I really enjoyed the present day story in Nexus. So here's the premise. You play as a member of the Brotherhood working undercover in Abstergo, the modern-day Templar organization. And once again, you're accompanied by Sean Hastings and Rebecca Crane from the previous games. The main Abstergo baddie this time is Dominica Wilk, and she's played by Morena Baccarin. You might just remember her from Firefly and Deadpool. So the folks at Abstergo have uncovered an ancient computer made by the first civilization. However, it's incomplete. It turns out that there's missing fragments, hidden throughout the past. Your job is to go back in time and retrieve those missing fragments. And guess what? It just so happens that they're in the memories of Ezio from Assassin's Creed 2, Connor from AC3, and Cassandra from AC Odyssey. Oh, and if you already played these games, don't worry, they're not rehashing any storylines. AC Nexus takes place in different periods and locations in their lives. For example, Ezio's story takes place in between AC Brotherhood and Revelations. Connor's story takes place in the middle of the Revolutionary War, but in a different part of town. And Cassandra's story takes place many years after the events of Odyssey. And in case you weren't aware, Cassandra is the canon choice in Odyssey and not Alexius.
I take it you got my note about the mercenario who attacked Monteriggioni.
Visually, AC Nexus looks amazing. You need to consider the fact that the MetaQuest 2 and 3 are running on smartphone hardware. The developers did an amazing job of recreating the look and style of the previous games and bringing them into VR. I got a sense of nostalgia playing as all three characters. Visiting Venice gave me flashbacks to the time when I played Assassin's Creed 2. The city of Boston looks and feels just like I remembered it in Assassin's Creed 3. And ancient Greece looks just as epic as it did in AC Odyssey. One thing that kind of bothered me was the NPCs. There's only a few NPC model types, which kind of ruins the experience when you see the same face over and over again in just slightly different outfits. Also, it's pretty obvious that the game was developed primarily for the MetaQuest 2. As far as I know, there's no major enhancements on the MetaQuest 3. So the question on everyone's mind is, how does Assassin's Creed translate into VR? Well, I'm happy to say that it does almost everything I asked for in an Assassin's Creed game. The parkour is fluid and seamless. It feels both familiar and different at the same time because you're moving around in first person. You can hop across rooftops, scale up and down walls, grab onto a rope and pulley, and of course, perform the leap of faith off a balcony. One thing that's going to throw off most veterans is the linear structure of the missions. It's not a true open world environment like in the previous games. It's more like semi-open world. What I mean by that is, in each mission, you'll be exploring different parts of the city. The map size is comparable to DLC size maps. They're not huge, but they felt big enough to explore, and once you're done with a mission, that's it for the area. You jump straight into the next mission at another location. Just like in the original games, there are tons of minigames and collectibles to keep you occupied, and these come in the form of animus constructs. There's the classic time trial which tests your parkour skills. There's the shooting trial that tests your aiming skills. If you scale the tallest of the tallest monuments, you'll be rewarded with a platinum construct, and if you're a history buff, there are historical constructs that act like mini encyclopedias. Just note that these constructs are purely optional. To my knowledge, there are no unlockable costumes or weapons like they did in the previous games. You do get an achievement for collecting them. The only annoying thing is that if you miss one, you have to go back and restart the mission.
What have we here?
At its core, Assassin's Creed is a stealth game, and Nexus is no exception. All the guards have alert meters, letting you know if they are aware of your presence. Just like any stealth game, you want to stick behind cover and avoid making too much noise. One thing that's new to the series that you've probably seen in other stealth games is the ability to throw objects like glass and bottles as a distraction. Eagle vision works like an X-ray and highlights the enemy's location. An old trick that's making a comeback is blending in with the crowd. You'll be doing this a lot in tailing missions. You can also hide inside bushes and haystacks. If you whistle, the enemies will come to your location, and you can perform a haystack assassination. Of course, the most satisfying stealth tool is the hidden blade. I mean, what's an Assassin's Creed game without one? Oh yeah, that's right. What I really like about playing in VR is that you literally have to flick your wrist to open up the hidden blade. Not only is it satisfying to take out enemies from behind, but you can also take them out from above and use them as a landing pad. Later in the game, you'll have access to either the bow or crossbow, which will allow you to take out guards from a distance. The alarm bells from Black Flag and Unity are back. Sabotaging them prevents the guards from calling in reinforcements. However, I thought it was kind of weird seeing them in Cassandra's time because they were never in Odyssey. They used fire braziers instead in that game. So the main complaint I keep hearing about Nexus is the combat system. Most people say that it's too easy and simplistic. Well, to be fair, if you played any of the older games, then you know that the combat system was always simplistic. That is until Origins rebooted the series. So it's already become cliche, but the classic combat routine was block, parry, and counterattack. For the most part, Assassin's Creed Nexus shares the same problems, but it does have a few tricks up its sleeves. So for starters, there's a dash ability that can break an enemy's defense. You can lunge forward and stab with your hidden blade. And if an enemy is performing a heavy attack, you can step to the side or duck and perform a counterattack. Each character is armed with projectile weapons like throwing knives and arrows. And if things get too hot, you can always toss a smoke bomb to make your grand escape. One thing that I felt was missing is that the weapons aren't upgradable like in the previous games. You see, they've replaced it with an upgrade tree that expands as you play the game. I think one of the most overlooked aspects of any VR game is the custom settings. There's a setting in AC Nexus that can accommodate almost anyone, whether you have motion sickness or if you're scared of heights. Like most VR games, you can switch the locomotion from continuous to teleport. I have to say though, playing AC Nexus in teleport mode strips out all the parkour and feels like a totally different game. The vignette setting helps reduce motion sickness when moving. You can customize the shape and how strong it is. Virtual nose is a weird one. Apparently, it's based on a study made several years ago by Purdue University. The students who played VR games with a virtual nose were less prone to motion sickness and were able to play longer than those who didn't. My favorite custom setting is Parkour Visualizer. It's basically a visual guide that lets you know where you're landing. You can also turn on auto parkour so you don't have to push the left thumbstick all the time. If you have a fear of heights, there's an entire section dedicated to you. Animus Grid places grid lines at your feet so that it gives you the impression that you're standing on a flat surface. Not only can you adjust the size, but you can also make it a square box that follows you around. Reduced fall visibility works just like Vignette. It creates tunnel vision but only when you fall down. And finally, there's a session break reminder. This is so you don't experience fatigue by spending too much time in VR. I guess the biggest negative about Assassin's Creed Nexus is the actual length of the game. If you skip all the collectibles and go straight for the missions, you can beat it in less than 10 hours. A completionist should take about 15 if you're trying to find everything. Also, there isn't a whole lot of side content other than the collectibles. The game's story did end on a cliffhanger, so depending on the sales, it does open up the possibility of a sequel. So the bottom line is, Assassin's Creed Nexus did not disappoint. It actually exceeded my expectations. It proves that the formula works just as well in VR as it did on consoles. I was worried because I felt the franchise was going downhill. So what's next for the franchise? Well, there's Assassin's Creed Jade, which takes place in ancient China. However, it's a mobile game on iOS and Android, which I'm not thrilled about. I mean, remember when Diablo Immortal was first announced?
Do you guys not have phones?
Yeah, you guys all have phones, right?
And then you have Assassin's Creed Infinity, which isn't a game, but a new hub or platform for the series. And the first two titles coming out of it are Assassin's Creed Codename Red and Codename Hex. If they do make a sequel to Nexus, will it be part of this new Infinity hub? Probably. At the time I'm recording this, Assassin's Creed Nexus is topping the charts on the Quest Store. I think the future of Assassin's Creed is looking hopeful now, and I can't wait for the next installment of Nexus in VR.